It's a pleasure to speak in the second reading of this bill, and I'm very pleased to say that I support the government's introduction of the Cyber Security and Resilience Bill, and welcome it for it is a very important first step in strengthening the protections of the UK's critical national infrastructure, and because it also addresses many of the gaps that have been identified in numerous implementation reviews in recent years. And as other honourable members and right honourable members have already made the point this afternoon, Madam Deputy Speaker, the risk and the harm inflicted by cyber attacks are significant and very real. Others have already cited the impact that it has on a whole host of businesses and industrial sectors, and as also society. We've heard of the impact and the harm that is inflicted on NHS services, for example, and also many members have referenced the attacks on JLR, the Co-op, and indeed on Marks and Spencer's. The impact that they had not only on those businesses but also the wider supply chains and local economies are significant, and I think the Minister indeed referenced in opening the debate that it is estimated that some £14.7 billion worth is lost to the UK economy annually due to cyber attacks, and that's equivalent of 0.5% of GDP. And so it is right that the government acts to try to address these risks and these harms, and in doing so they comply with one of the clauses of the Strategic Defence Review, of course, which stated that the world has changed, and in listing the other sort of more conventional threats that the country faces also specifies that daily cyber attacks at home is something that we need to take very seriously. And so I think the government is right to bring forward this bill, and as other members have made very clear, the nature of cyber crime, cyber attacks and the threat that they pose are ever evolving. And so I do have a great deal of sympathy with the government that they are endeavouring to try to keep up with what is a very quickly and rapidly developing industry and nature of threat. And although I support the bill and look forward to working with ministers as the legislation passes through the House, I would like to raise just 2 points on which I'd welcome clarity or indeed further consideration of the ministers. A few members have mentioned the importance of looking at our cyber resilience in a more holistic manner, and that whilst technical security and safety is very important, and I think the bill goes a long way to address those matters, it could perhaps be strengthened in the terms of looking at our digital sovereignty, if you like. Other members have made the very important point that we do need to consider supplier concentration in this field and the domestic capability, because if we fail to do so, we do risk long-term dependency. Now, there are a few examples that I could draw upon. Perhaps the one that I will is that of when Microsoft decided to suspend the use of some of its services to justices in the International Criminal Court. Now, I'm not saying that Microsoft are going to threaten the UK government or any of our services, but it does illustrate the risk that if we are over-dependent, or if aspects of our economy or businesses are overly dependent on certain suppliers, then we are vulnerable. And then I think it is right that the government has a way of looking to try to prepare contingency plans for that, or at the very least consider the potential impact of over-dependence on certain suppliers. And in that regard, I wonder whether actually Part 3 of the bill, in which the legislation stipulates that a statement of strategic priorities will be made by ministers, whether this is a consideration that could be included as part of that statement. We could then bring about a way in which a statement not only looks at the technical security as part of a cyber resilience approach, but also this digital sovereignty and domestic capability. And I do think in that regard, it's not too dissimilar to some of the efforts we're starting to see from European partners. I think France and Germany are starting to look to undertake similar strategies and reviews of their own domestic capability and potential over-reliance on certain suppliers. The second and final point I'd raise, and perhaps this is more for clarity, looking for clarity from the ministers, perhaps when they're summing up, relates to Part 4 of the bill and the directions to certain bodies and persons for national security purposes. I do feel as though if we accept that the nature of the cyber threat and the risks to cybersecurity are ever evolving, it will be impossible for any one legislation to hope to encompass all the possible dangers that we may face. And so in order to try and future-proof the bill, especially in terms of national emergencies or crises, I wonder whether ministers should consider even further powers in terms of the last resort powers, particularly to perhaps direct or enable them to direct the shutdown of any domestic data centres or AI systems in the event of a security or operational emergency. I ask this because I'm not entirely clear whether the powers listed in the bill already allow them to do that or not, but if not, I'd ask whether they'd be willing to consider such powers, just so that the government is able, in the future, in the event of such a national crisis or emergency, to intervene appropriately if those emergencies are caused by AI systems out of particular data centres that could have or could cause large-scale harm to the public, especially under those very rare and hopefully unlikely scenario in which the designated people and persons that are otherwise responsible for those systems refuse to cooperate with the government. But in raising those 2 points, Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to underline my support for the government's efforts in this regard and very much welcome the bill and its second reading today.